Dr. Matthew Clarke, the respected Australian physician with everything to lose, and Leila Al-Mansoor, the wealthy Dubai heiress with secrets of her own, two lives that should never have crossed. Their forbidden affair, hidden in luxury hotels and late-night phone calls, spiraled into betrayal, blackmail, and finally, the brutal murder of Leila's father. What began as a dangerous romance ended in blood, leaving behind one of the most shocking and mysterious true crime cases Sydney had ever seen. In the year 2018, Sydney's eastern suburbs represented wealth, elegance, and prestige. It was in this setting that Dr. Matthew Clarke thrived, a man who was more than just a doctor. He was a symbol of success. His clinic was situated in a prime location, surrounded by glass towers and overlooking the sparkling harbor. Patients described him as calm, intelligent, and trustworthy. To his colleagues, he was a rising figure in Australia's medical world. At home, he was a husband and father, living in a large house that seemed to reflect the perfection of his career. To anyone watching from the outside, Clarke had it all. Yet behind the image of discipline and professionalism, there was a hidden weakness that would eventually unravel his entire life. Clarke's clinic was not an ordinary one. It catered to elite clients, politicians, wealthy entrepreneurs, and international figures who valued privacy as much as medical expertise. Among those who sought his care was a man whose presence would forever change Clarke's life. Fahad Al-Mansoor, a businessman from Dubai, had built a reputation across the Middle East as a powerful and influential figure. He came to Sydney for treatment of a long-standing health issue, trusting Clarke with matters of both confidentiality and well-being. With Fahad, however, came his only daughter, Leila. Leila was in her mid-20s, strikingly beautiful and confident. She carried herself with the poise of someone accustomed to wealth, but also with an air of mystery that immediately drew attention. She accompanied her father to appointments, often waiting in the clinic lounge with quiet elegance. At first, Clarke's interest in her was purely casual, a fleeting curiosity about the daughter of his high-profile patient. But over time, that curiosity deepened into something far more dangerous. The first encounters between Clarke and Leila were unremarkable to outsiders. Short conversations, polite exchanges, moments of eye contact that lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Yet for Clarke, those moments awakened desires he had carefully buried beneath his professional life. His career had been built on control, but Leila's presence disturbed that balance. She was much younger, unattainable, and forbidden. The fact that she was tied to one of his most important patients only added to the danger. What Clarke didn't realize at the time was that this attraction would become the seed of his downfall. He saw it as a harmless indulgence, a private thrill hidden behind the polished surface of his life. But each glance, each silent exchange, was pushing him toward a line that once crossed could never be undone. It was the beginning of a story that would lead to betrayal, obsession, and eventually murder. The relationship between Clarke and Leila grew in shadows, beginning as a series of subtle encounters and transforming into a dangerous connection neither could easily abandon. Clarke justified the early moments as harmless, short meetings outside the clinic, a quiet coffee after her father's appointments, the exchange of numbers under the pretense of discussing medical details. But those excuses quickly disappeared as the two began to see each other in secret. What started as curiosity became an affair hidden beneath the surface of Clarke's carefully constructed life. Each meeting added to the thrill, each lie told at home became easier to repeat, and the sense of risk only heightened the passion. For Clarke, the affair provided an escape from the pressure of his reputation. With Leila, he was not the polished doctor or respected husband, but a man indulging in something reckless. For Leila, the relationship gave her access to a life beyond her father's shadow. She was used to privilege, but she longed for freedom and excitement. Clarke, older and authoritative, seemed to offer both, yet their bond was not just about desire. Soon it became entangled with money, secrecy, and control. Clarke began transferring large sums into accounts linked to Leila, explaining it as financial support, though to outsiders it looked suspiciously like bribery or blackmail. The deeper Clarke sank into the relationship, the more entangled his personal and professional worlds became. At home, he lied about late nights at the clinic. At work, he fabricated explanations for sudden withdrawals and expenses. To his colleagues, nothing seemed unusual, but behind closed doors he was living a double life. The pressure of keeping the affair hidden grew heavier, especially when Leila demanded more. She wanted a future with Clarke, one that required him to leave his family behind. For Clarke, the fantasy of escaping with her was thrilling, but the reality was terrifying. His marriage, his children, and his professional standing were all at stake. The situation escalated when Fahad discovered troubling hints of the affair. Suspicious messages on his daughter's phone revealed more than Clarke ever intended. To a man like Fahad, honor was everything and betrayal was unforgivable. His trust in Clarke as a doctor and as a confidant was shattered in an instant. The threat that followed was clear and absolute. If the affair continued, Clarke's career and reputation would be destroyed. For Clarke, it was a warning that should have ended everything. Instead, it marked the beginning of a dangerous path that would soon lead to violence. On the morning of May 14, 2019, the calm of Sydney's luxury district was shattered when staff at the Al-Mansoor residence grew concerned. Fahad, who was known for his punctuality, had failed to attend an important business meeting. Repeated calls to his suite went unanswered, and the silence quickly raised alarms. By mid-morning, hotel staff made the decision to alert authorities. When officers arrived and forced entry into the penthouse, what they found inside was a scene of pure horror. Fahad's body lay sprawled on the polished marble floor, his skull fractured by repeated, deliberate blows. The room told the story of a violent struggle. A crystal ornament, now smeared with blood, rested on the carpet just inches from his head. Splashes of crimson marked the walls and furniture, evidence of an attack that had been both frenzied and personal. Investigators noted broken glass scattered across the floor, a table overturned, and curtains torn loose during the fight. The brutality suggested not a random intruder, but someone with a deep and personal motive. Initial speculation leaned toward robbery, but nothing valuable was missing. Fahad's watch, worth tens of thousands of dollars, still rested on his wrist. His wallet remained untouched, as did a drawer filled with cash and documents. What was unusual, however, was the absence of his phone. Investigators believed it had been deliberately removed from the scene, perhaps to erase evidence of communications in the hours leading up to the murder. The building's security footage provided the first breakthrough. At around 11:40 p.m. the previous night, cameras captured a man entering through a side entrance. He wore a dark jacket and a baseball cap, his face partially obscured by the brim. Around 12:15 a.m., the same man was seen leaving, moving quickly but not hurriedly, his posture tense. The footage was grainy, but investigators focused on his build and gait. Some officers believed the figure bore a resemblance to Dr. Matthew Clarke, a man already of interest given his close relationship with both Fahad and Leila. The discovery ignited immediate suspicion, but nothing could be confirmed yet. For detectives, the unanswered questions grew heavier. Why had Fahad's phone been taken? Who had such intimate access to the penthouse at that hour? And why did the attack seem so fueled by rage? Each detail pointed away from a simple crime of opportunity and toward a murder that was deeply personal. As investigators dug deeper, the murder of Fahad Al-Mansoor began to reveal layers of secrets hidden beneath the polished surface of Sydney's elite. The initial suspicion of robbery quickly gave way to something more sinister when detectives began tracing the victim's personal connections. The name that appeared again and again was Dr. Matthew Clarke. His clinic records showed regular appointments with Fahad, but Clarke's link to Leila drew the most attention. Phone logs revealed an unusual number of late-night calls between Clarke and Fahad's daughter, particularly in the days leading up to the killing. The frequency suggested more than a professional relationship. Detectives obtained financial records and soon discovered large transfers from Clarke's accounts to offshore accounts associated with Leila. These transactions were not small sums. They were enough to suggest either hush money or financial dependence. For investigators, the picture was becoming clear. Clarke had placed himself in a dangerous triangle, caught between a furious father and a demanding lover. What they needed now was evidence that tied him directly to the crime scene. Forensic specialists examined every inch of the penthouse. On the murder weapon, a crystal ornament, fingerprints belonging to Leila were identified, though she explained it away as an innocent touch from visiting her father's suite earlier. More telling was the discovery of microscopic blood traces on Clarke's car seat, later confirmed to be a match for Fahad's DNA. Even more damning, DNA material found under Fahad's fingernails matched Clarke, suggesting a struggle where the victim tried to defend himself. Still, Clarke denied involvement. He told investigators he had been home with his family at the time of the murder, though gaps in his alibi remained unexplained. His insistence only deepened suspicion, especially after security camera footage showed the unidentified figure entering and leaving the building at the exact time of death. Analysts studied the body language and build of the figure and noted uncanny similarities to Clarke. Attention briefly shifted to Leila when her fingerprints were linked to the weapon. Some detectives theorized she could have manipulated the doctor, orchestrating events so that suspicion would fall on him while she walked away untouched. Yet her alibi placed her at a social gathering across town, confirmed by multiple witnesses. It created a frustrating paradox for the investigation. Every lead pointed back to Clarke, but questions about Leila's involvement refused to disappear. The deeper the detectives searched, the clearer it became that this was not only a crime of passion. It was a carefully tangled web of betrayal and manipulation, and someone was still hiding the full truth. The trial that followed was one of the most closely watched in Australia, a spectacle that gripped both the media and the public. Dr. Matthew Clarke, once admired as a man of impeccable reputation, now stood accused of murdering the very patient who had trusted him most. Prosecutors painted a picture of a man who risked everything for a forbidden relationship, a doctor who became entangled in lust, money, and deceit until violence was the only way out. They laid out the evidence piece by piece: the secret bank transfers, the late night calls to Leila, the DNA under Fahad's fingernails, and the grainy footage of a figure whose resemblance to Clarke could not be ignored. To the prosecution, the motive was clear. Fahad had discovered the affair, threatened Clarke's career, and the doctor silenced him in a fit of desperation. The defense countered with an entirely different narrative. They argued that Clarke had been manipulated by Leila, a young woman desperate to free herself from her father's control. They suggested that she had used her influence over Clarke to push him into a corner, threatening to expose the affair if he did not protect her. The defense highlighted her fingerprints on the murder weapon, the financial dependence she had created, and her quick departure to Dubai before the trial. They claimed Clarke was not a cold-blooded killer, but a man ensnared in a trap set by someone who knew how to play both victim and instigator. The courtroom was divided. Journalists filled columns with speculation about whether Leila had orchestrated everything and escaped justice. Public opinion swung wildly between seeing Clarke as a murderer and viewing him as a pawn. The absence of Leila's testimony only deepened the mystery. She refused to return from Dubai, citing safety concerns, leaving the jury to decide without hearing her side of the story. In 2021, after weeks of deliberation, Clarke was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. The verdict closed the case in the eyes of the law, but it left behind questions that refused to fade. Was Clarke truly the sole architect of Fahad's death, or had he been driven to commit the act under pressure from Leila? Did she play a far greater role than anyone could prove? The official story ended with Clarke behind bars, but in whispers and speculation, the shadow of Leila lingered, ensuring the case would never feel fully resolved. It remained a haunting mystery, a tale of passion, betrayal, and a murder that may never reveal its complete truth.